As the gospel was proclaimed in more and more parts of the world, it brought about changes. Changes which quite often challenged long-standing social customs and traditions. For example, the status of women in society. Just as with changes in the church today, some welcomed those changes when they came about and were delighted to see them taking place. But others thought some of those changes were going a little bit too far. And at times, their concerns were justified. That along with some very good ideas that were very clearly faithful to the gospel, there were also some pretty crazy ideas put forth too. And at times, such concerns then became an issue. As always, the idea of change is one thing, the reality of it something else entirely. And the early church struggled with knowing which changes then were really and truly the fruit of the Spirit and which were just someone's wild idea. I mean, if someone claims to be in the Spirit speaking for God, how do you know that's so? How can you tell whether they are speaking in the true Spirit or not? This is the issue that Paul is struggling with in 1 Thessalonians, which is thought, as I mentioned earlier, to be the oldest book in the New Testament, one dating from very early in the church's history, among the first generation of believers. And even at that early date, the church is already struggling with how to decide whether something is legitimately of the Spirit or not. And one answer that came up to that dilemma was simply to declare that the Spirit was no longer speaking to the church. That was over. That when the Spirit was poured out on the apostles on the day of Pentecost, that from then on the Spirit spoke through the apostles and no one else. So anyone claiming to speak for the Spirit who wasn't an apostle, well, they were clearly not in their right mind. Now, Paul, not surprisingly, was not willing to accept that. For Paul, the Spirit, being the Spirit, continued to speak to the church through men and women who were called to be prophets, not just the apostles. But Paul was also painfully aware that some who claimed to be prophets were not. So again, the problem. How do you tell the difference? How do you know whether someone is genuinely inspired, that is, in the Spirit, or not at all? Paul's answer to this question is found in our epistle lesson this morning. And they are words that are just as relevant for the church today as they were in Paul's time. Paul doesn't want to quench the Spirit. He doesn't want to reject out of hand the words of those who claim to be prophets, because they might very well be. They might be prophets who are speaking truly from the Spirit. But at the same time, not everyone who claimed to be doing that was so. So what do you do? What do you do? I find Paul's answer to this question one of the most remarkable things he ever said. And Paul said a lot of remarkable things. But this I simply find extraordinary, that he had the courage to say this to the church. He says, test everything. Try it and see what happens. If it seems to be genuinely good, seems to be truly of the Spirit, well then keep it, do it. And if not, if it just doesn't work out or bear fruits that are of the Spirit, well then get rid of it. Don't do it. But don't quench the Spirit. or despise the words of the prophets just because there are some out there who might lead you astray. And if the church today were as open to that possibility as the Apostle Paul was, we'd be in a lot better shape. And why isn't the church open to that possibility? The possibility that the Spirit might still be speaking to us today. Well, ironically, part of the problem there is Christmas, or at least is what Christmas has become for many of us. You see, this whole dynamic of loving the idea of the one who is coming, but tending to have doubts about the one who actually came, all of that takes a very special form for us in the fashion of our Christmas, in the way we celebrate Christmas. Now, we all love Christmas. Everybody loves Christmas. How could you not love Christmas? And in particular, we love the Christmas story as it is told by Luke. Even if we didn't want to keep any of the rest of the Gospel of Luke, we'd all want Luke 1 and 2, where the Christmas story is told. We love it, and for good reason, because it is a great story. We love the angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary that she's going to have a baby. We love the part about Joseph and Mary traveling to Bethlehem and finding no room there at the inn. So when Mary gives birth to the child, she has to put him where? In a manger. We love that. We love the shepherds keeping watch over their flocks by night, who then come to visit him. Everyone loves this story because everyone loves baby Jesus. In fact, I think a lot of us would deep down inside prefer that he stay that way, that he stay baby Jesus. Because if he does that, then we can just project all of our hopes and dreams on the baby, just like we do our own infants. And as long as baby Jesus remains our Messiah, the one who is coming, then ours is a religion that is nothing but hopes and dreams and no reality at all. Always something that is going to be, but never really is. But the fact is, baby Jesus grew up. Baby Jesus grew up, and through his teachings in the course of his own life, Jesus held out to us a vision of what a better world looks like. A vision which continues to reverberate through both the church and the world still today, challenging us in ways that are not always comfortable for us, in ways that are not always what we expected or what we would have thought of as a better world. And in all of that, his Spirit is still speaking to us. The Spirit is still pushing us toward that better world, his idea of a better world, not ours. And doing so in ways that still surprise us, still cause us at times to wonder whether that's truly the Spirit or not. And it's at those moments when we don't know, when we think maybe it's the Spirit, but maybe not. It's at those moments that those words of Paul are still so important. Do not quench the Spirit. Do not despise the words of the prophets. Test everything. Hold on to what is good and get rid of what is not. Words that are every bit as true today as the day Paul wrote them to the church in Thessalonica. Because, friends, the Spirit of Jesus is still alive in the church. And that Spirit is still speaking to us, calling us into that better world. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, to whom be all glory and honor now and forevermore.